Maria Rodriguez stepped into the towering glass building in downtown Manhattan on a cold October morning in 2023. She was 42 years old, a cleaning woman who had spent the last 20 years moving from one building to another, scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans for people who rarely looked her in the eye. The building on Fifth Avenue was her newest assignment, and as she pushed her cart toward the elevators, she noticed the gleaming marble floors, the expensive art on the walls, the smell of wealth that permeated every corner. "You're the new cleaner?" a security guard asked, looking up from his desk. He was an older man, perhaps 60, with a thick Brooklyn accent and tired eyes. "Yes," Maria replied in accented English. "Maria Rodriguez. I start today." 40th floor, the guard said, handing her a badge. "Executive offices. You'll be cleaning for Mr. Harrison. He's particular about his space, so be careful with his desk. Don't move anything unless you're dusting it. And whatever you do, don't touch the photographs. He gets real upset about that." "I understand," Maria said, clipping the badge to her uniform. "Thank you for the advice." "You seem like a nice lady," the guard said. "Most cleaners don't last more than a month up there. Harrison's demanding. Not mean, just precise. Everything has to be exactly right." "I can do precise," Maria assured him. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt endless. Maria watched the numbers climb steadily, her reflection distorted in the polished steel doors. She looked tired. She was tired. 20 years of cleaning had aged her beyond her years. Her hands were rough from chemicals, the skin cracked despite the lotion she applied every night. Her back ached constantly from bending, lifting, reaching, but it was honest work, and it paid enough to cover her small apartment in Queens and the occasional visit to her foster mother's grave in New Jersey. The 40th floor was silent when she arrived. It was 6 in the morning, too early for executives. Maria moved through the hallway, checking room numbers against the list she had been given. Suite 40, 10, 40, 11, 40, 12, there it was. Richard Harrison, Chief Executive Officer, Harrison Development Corporation. The door was unlocked. Maria entered carefully, taking in the massive office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park, the trees just beginning to turn orange and red with autumn. A mahogany desk dominated the center of the room, its surface polished to a mirror shine. Leather chairs that probably cost more than Maria made in a year. Bookshelves filled with legal volumes and business books with titles like Real Estate Empire Building and The Art of Negotiation. And photographs. Dozens of them. Pictures of a man shaking hands with politicians, cutting ribbons at building openings, standing in front of skyscrapers under construction. But one photograph caught Maria's attention immediately. It was partially hidden behind a stack of files on a side table near the window. A faded color photograph showing a man, much younger than in the other pictures, holding a little girl with wild, dark, curly hair. The girl was smiling, her small hand wrapped around the man's finger. She was wearing a yellow dress with white flowers. Maria picked up the photograph with trembling hands. She didn't know why her hands were shaking. The little girl had a distinctive birthmark on her left wrist. A butterfly-shaped mark, clearly visible even in the old photograph. Maria set down her cleaning supplies slowly. She pulled up the sleeve of her uniform with deliberate care. On her left wrist was an identical birthmark, butterfly-shaped, dark brown against her olive skin, something she had carried her entire life, a mark that the nuns at the orphanage had called God's signature and told her made her special. "Can I help you?" Maria jumped violently, dropping the photograph. It clattered on the desk. A man stood in the doorway. He was in his mid-70s, tall despite his age, with silver hair that still had hints of dark brown at the temples. His eyes were sharp despite the lines around them, and he wore an expensive suit even at this early hour. "I'm sorry," Maria stammered, her heart racing. "I'm the new cleaner. I was dusting and I saw the photograph and You were looking at my daughter," the man said, but his voice wasn't angry. It was curious, tinged with something Maria couldn't identify. Sadness, perhaps, or longing. "That's my daughter," or "That was my daughter." "Was?" Maria asked, her mouth dry. The man walked into the office, moving with the careful deliberation of someone whose body had started to betray him. "She disappeared 23 years ago. She was 5 years old. My ex-wife took her during a custody battle. A very ugly custody battle. We never found them. I hired investigators. I offered rewards. I searched for years. But they were gone. Maria felt dizzy. She gripped the edge of the desk. What was her name? The man looked at Maria strangely, his eyes narrowing slightly. Emma. Emma Rose Harrison. Why do you ask? Did you know her? Did someone send you here? No, Maria's mind was racing, memories flickering like broken film. I was adopted when I was 5 years old, in 2000. I don't remember much from before. The social workers said I was found wandering alone in Newark. But I remember being called Emma. I remember that name. I remember someone singing to me about stars. The man froze completely. His face went white. He sat down heavily in his chair, gripping the armrests as if his legs could no longer support him. Stars, he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. I used to sing to her every night. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. 5 times in a row. She wouldn't go to sleep otherwise. They stared at each other across the desk, the weight of possibility hanging between them like something physical, something that could be touched. Show me your wrist, Richard finally said, his voice tight with emotion. He was clearly trying to control. Please, show me your left wrist. Maria hesitated for only a moment, then extended her left arm across the desk. The butterfly birthmark was clearly visible in the morning light, streaming through the windows. Richard Harrison's hands were shaking as he reached out, not touching her skin but hovering just above the mark. My daughter had that exact birthmark. The pediatrician said it was unique, 1 in a million, a capillary malformation shaped like a butterfly. He said he'd never seen anything like it in 30 years of practice. They sat in silence for a long moment. Maria could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She could hear the distant sound of traffic far below. She could hear Richard's breathing, quick and shallow. I need to know, Richard finally said, looking up at her with tears forming in his eyes. I need to know if you're her. Would you be willing to take a DNA test? I'll pay for everything. The best lab in the city. But I need to know. Maria nodded slowly, unable to speak. Her throat felt closed. I would like to know too, she finally managed to say. I've spent my whole life wondering where I came from. The next 3 weeks were the longest of Maria's life. The DNA test was simple. A cheek swab performed by a medical technician in a private lab on the Upper East Side. A few forms to sign. A promise that results would be ready within 2 weeks. But the waiting was excruciating. Maria continued to clean Richard Harrison's office every morning, and each day he was there when she arrived. Waiting. They didn't talk about the test directly. They didn't discuss what would happen if the results were positive or negative. Instead, they talked about everything else. Richard told her about his business, about starting with nothing in the 1970s, about buying his first building with borrowed money, about the risks he had taken that had either paid off spectacularly or nearly destroyed him. He told her about his first marriage to Emma's mother, a woman named Catherine who had been beautiful and charming and deeply unstable. I didn't see the signs early enough, Richard said one morning, as Maria dusted the bookshelves and he sat at his desk, no longer even pretending to work. Or maybe I saw them and ignored them. She was difficult, jealous, paranoid. She accused me of affairs I never had. She threw things. She disappeared for days at a time. But I thought I could help her. I thought love could fix her. What happened? Maria asked softly. We had Emma, Richard said. And for a while, Catherine seemed better. Being a mother gave her focus. But then the paranoia got worse. She became convinced I was trying to take Emma away from her. She started talking about people following her, about conspiracies. I tried to get her help, but she refused. And then one day I came home from work, and they were both gone. Every trace of them. Clothes, toys, photographs, gone. And you looked for them, Maria said. For years, Richard confirmed. I spent millions on investigators. I hired the best. We tracked them to Newark, but the trail went cold. Catherine was smart when she wanted to be. She knew how to disappear. And without social media back then, without the internet we have now, it was like they vanished into thin air. Maria told him about her life in foster care, about being placed with 7 different families before she turned 18, about the families who had been kind but overwhelmed, about the families who had been neglectful or worse, about learning to pack her belongings in 30 minutes because she never knew when she'd be moved again, about the feeling of never quite belonging anywhere. I always felt like something was missing, Maria said one morning as she wiped down the windows. Like there was a piece of me that I couldn't remember. The social workers had a file, but it was thin. They said I was found wandering alone near a bus station in Newark. I wouldn't tell anyone my name. I wouldn't tell anyone where I came from. I just kept saying I want my daddy over and over until I cried myself to sleep. Richard's hands were shaking as he gripped his coffee cup. My ex-wife lived in Newark before we married. She had family there, cousins and aunt. If she went back there and then... If she abandoned you there, it would explain why no one ever found me, Maria finished quietly. Why didn't you look for your family when you got older? Richard asked, his voice gentle but curious. I did, Maria said, turning from the window to face him. When I turned 21, I tried. But I had no information. No birth certificate. No medical records, nothing. The state had given me a new identity. Maria Rodriguez. They said the name came from a social worker who was processing my paperwork. She just picked it. I became someone new because the old me was so completely lost that she might as well have never existed. But you did exist, Richard said firmly. Emma existed. And if you're my daughter, then you always existed. You were always mine, even when I couldn't find you. On a Thursday morning in early November, Maria's phone rang at 5:30 in the morning. She was still in bed, her alarm set for 6. She saw Richard Harrison's name on the screen. The results came back, he said without preamble, his voice unsteady. Can you come to my office now? I know it's early, but I can't wait. I need to know. We need to know together. Maria didn't bother showering. She threw on clothes, pulled her hair into a ponytail, and took a taxi. Something she never did, too anxious to wait for the subway. The fare was $30. She didn't care. She needed to know. When she arrived at the building, the security guard looked surprised to see her so early. He called down, the guard said. Said to send you right up. The elevator ride felt even longer than usual. Maria watched the numbers climb, her reflection distorted, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. Richard was standing by the window when she entered, an envelope in his hands. The office was dark except for the desk lamp. The sun hadn't risen yet. The city below was still wrapped in pre-dawn darkness. I haven't opened it yet, he said without turning around. I wanted us to look together. Whatever it says, we deserve to know together. Maria walked to stand beside him. She could see her reflection in the window. She could see his. Two people, strangers, about to discover if they were bound by blood or just by a strange coincidence. They sat across from each other at his desk. Richard opened the envelope with careful hands, pulling out the official document from the laboratory. His eyes scanned the page once, twice, a third time. Then tears began to fall. 99.99% probability of paternity, he read aloud, his voice breaking. You're my daughter. Emma, you're my daughter. You came back to me. Maria felt something break open inside her. All the years of wondering, of feeling incomplete, of searching for a place to belong, it all came flooding out at once. She began to cry, deep wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. Richard came around the desk and held her, and they both wept. 23 years of loss and longing pouring out in that dark office as the sun began to rise over Manhattan. I looked for you every single day, Richard said through his tears, holding her tight. Every single day for 23 years I looked for you. I never stopped hoping. I never gave up. I'm sorry, Maria sobbed into his shoulder. I'm sorry I couldn't remember. I'm sorry you suffered. I'm sorry for all the years we lost. It's not your fault, Richard said firmly, pulling back to look at her face, holding her shoulders. None of this was your fault. Your mother was sick. She made terrible choices that hurt all of us. But you're here now. Against all impossible odds, you're here. You came back to me. They sat together for a long time, watching the sun rise over the city, the light gradually filling the office. Neither spoke. There was too much to say and no words adequate to say it. Finally, Richard broke the silence. What do we do now? Maria wiped her eyes. I don't know. I've been Maria Rodriguez for 23 years. I don't know how to be Emma Harrison. You don't have to be anyone but yourself, Richard said. But I want to give you everything you were denied. I want to give me money, Maria interrupted gently. A new identity? A place in your world? Yes, Richard said honestly. You're my heir. Everything I've built should have been yours. Should be yours. Maria shook her head slowly. I don't want your money. Not now, maybe not ever. What I want is to know you. I want to understand who my father is. I want to build a relationship, but I can't just step into a life I never lived. I can't suddenly become someone I'm not. Richard looked hurt, but he nodded. Then we'll take it slow. Whatever you need. I've waited 23 years. I can wait longer if that's what you need. It's not about waiting, Maria said. It's about building. We're not picking up where we left off. We can't. We're starting from scratch. Two adults who happen to share DNA. We need to learn each other. I want that, Richard said. More than anything, I want that. Over the following months, they carefully built a relationship. Maria continued to clean offices. Not Richard's anymore, that felt too strange now, but other buildings in Manhattan. Richard respected her choice to keep working, even though it pained him deeply to know his daughter was scrubbing floors for minimum wage when he had millions in the bank. They had dinner once a week, always at small restaurants, never at his exclusive clubs. Maria felt uncomfortable in those spaces, surrounded by wealth and privilege she had never known. Richard learned to meet her where she was, to respect her world rather than expecting her to enter his. 3 months after the DNA results, Richard introduced Maria to his son from his second marriage. Michael Harrison was 43 years old, a successful lawyer with a wife and 2 teenage children. The meeting was arranged at a restaurant in Midtown, neutral territory. Michael arrived 15 minutes late, looking harried. He shook Maria's hand formally. "So you're the long-lost sister," he said, sitting down and immediately ordering a whiskey. "I suppose I am," Maria said quietly. "Michael," Richard said sharply, "I told you to keep an open mind." "I am keeping an open mind," Michael said. "But you have to understand, Dad, this is a lot to process. I thought I was an only child my entire life. Now suddenly I have a sister who's 42 years old. Her sister who conveniently shows up just when you're thinking about estate planning." "The DNA test doesn't lie," Richard said, his voice tight with anger. "And you need to be respectful. This is your sister, whether you like it or not." "I didn't say I didn't like it," Michael said, taking a long drink. "I'm just saying it's strange. Suspicious, even. How do we know someone didn't coach her? How do we know she didn't somehow fake the DNA test?" Maria stood up. "I'm going to leave. This was a mistake." "No, wait," Michael said, looking genuinely apologetic. "I'm sorry. That was inappropriate. Please sit down." Maria hesitated, then sat back down slowly. Michael sighed, rubbing his face. "Look, I'm a lawyer. I see scams all the time. People who prey on wealthy, older people, who manufacture relationships to get at their money. It's my job to be suspicious. But Dad believes you. And Dad is many things, but he's not stupid. So I'm willing to give you the benefit of the doubt." "I don't want his money," Maria said firmly. "I just want to know my father." Michael studied her for a long moment. "You have his eyes," he finally said. "The same exact color, green with gold flecks. I never noticed before, but looking at you now, it's unmistakable. You have the same eyes." The dinner was awkward, but it ended better than it began. Michael's wife Laura joined them for dessert, and she was warmer, asking Maria questions about her life with genuine interest. Michael's children, who were 17 and 15, thought the whole situation was totally insane and wanted to know if they could post about it on social media. "Absolutely not," Richard said firmly. "This stays private for now. We are not ready for public attention." Slowly, carefully, Michael warmed to Maria. He introduced her to his world of law firms and corporate deals. She found it fascinating and completely foreign. He visited her apartment in Queens once, and she could see him trying to hide his shock at how small it was, how modest her life had been. "You really live here?" he asked, looking around the studio apartment that served as her bedroom. "Living room and kitchen all in one space. It's all I need," Maria said, feeling defensive. "I didn't mean it as an insult," Michael said quickly. I can't imagine. I've lived with comfort my whole life. I take it for granted. But you've had to work for everything. It made me strong," Maria said. "Maybe stronger than I would have been otherwise. But not everyone was accepting. Richard's business partners were deeply suspicious. His lawyers warned him repeatedly about gold diggers and con artists, despite the DNA evidence. His ex-wife from his second marriage, Michael's mother, sent a scathing email calling Maria a manipulator and threatening legal action if Richard changed his will. Let them talk, Richard told Maria when she expressed her concerns. They don't matter. Only you matter. Only us matters, but the doubt from others wore on Maria. The suspicious looks from Richard's colleagues at the office, the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. The articles that started appearing in business, publications speculating about Richard Harrison's sudden found daughter and what it might mean for the succession of his company. She began to question whether she had made a mistake by reaching out, by taking the DNA test, by disrupting Richard's comfortable life. Maybe I should disappear again, she told Richard one evening. They were walking through Central Park, the autumn leaves crunching under their feet, the air cold enough to see their breath. Maybe it's too complicated. Maybe some things are better left lost. No, Richard said firmly, stopping to face her. He took both her hands in his. I lost you once. I won't lose you again. I don't care what anyone says. I don't care how complicated it is. You're my daughter. That's all that matters. But I'm not the daughter you lost, Maria said, pulling her hands away. That little girl is gone. She doesn't exist anymore. I'm just someone who has her DNA. You're not just someone, Richard said, his voice fierce. You're Emma. You're the baby I held. You're the little girl who used to make me read the same bedtime story 5 times in a row. You're the child I sang to sleep every night. You might not remember, but I do. And even if you don't remember, you're still her. You're still mine. Something shifted in Maria in that moment. She had spent her entire life feeling like she didn't belong anywhere, like she was always on the outside looking in. But here in this park, with this man who claimed her as his own despite everything, she felt something she had never felt before. She felt found. A year after the DNA results, Richard proposed something unexpected. They were having one of their weekly dinners, this time at his apartment. It was the first time Maria had visited his home, and she had been stunned by its size, by the luxury of it. I want to establish a foundation, Richard said over coffee, for children who were separated from their families, to help them find their way home. Maria looked up, surprised. Why? Because of you, Richard said. Because I know there are other families out there, torn apart by circumstance or malice or tragedy or mental illness. I want to help them reunite. I want to fund investigators, DNA testing, legal services, whatever it takes. That's a beautiful idea, Maria said softly. I want you to run it, Richard added. Maria's eyes widened. Me? I'm a cleaning woman. I dropped out of community college after 1 semester. I don't know anything about running a foundation. You know everything about being lost and found, Richard said. That's what matters. We'll hire people to handle the logistics, the accounting, the legal aspects. But I want your voice, your experience, your perspective to guide it. You understand what these families are going through. You've lived it. Maria thought about it for a long moment, staring into her coffee cup. I don't know if I can do it. I know you can, Richard said. You've survived things that would have destroyed most people. You've built a life from nothing. You're stronger than you think you are, and you'll have support. You'll have me. You'll have Michael. You'll have resources. You won't be alone in this. Maria looked up at him, tears in her eyes. Okay, let's do it. Let's help other people find their way home. The Emma Rose Foundation launched 2 years after Maria and Richard reunited. It started small, operating out of a modest office in Midtown Manhattan with a staff of 5 people. They helped a handful of families navigate the complex systems of foster care, adoption records, and legal reunification. But word spread quickly. The foundation grew. Maria discovered she had a natural talent for connecting with people who were searching. She understood their pain in a way that no amount of professional training could teach. She sat with mothers who had lost children to custody battles, their voices breaking as they described years of searching. She helped fathers navigate the Byzantine legal system to find sons and daughters taken decades earlier. She worked with adoptees trying to piece together their origins, their identities, their histories. You saved my life, one woman told her, after the foundation helped her reunite with the daughter she had given up for adoption 30 years earlier. The woman was in her 50s, tears streaming down her face. I thought I would never see her again. I thought I would die without ever knowing if she was okay. And because of you, she's back in my life. We talk every day now. I'm going to be at her wedding next month. Because of you. Maria hugged the woman tightly, feeling the weight of gratitude and purpose wash over her. This was what she was meant to do. This was how she could transform her pain into something meaningful, Richard watched his daughter blossom with quiet pride. She quit cleaning entirely and devoted herself fully to the foundation. She learned about non-profit management, fundraising, public speaking. She testified before Congress about reforming adoption and foster care systems, speaking with eloquence born from experience. She became, in her own right, someone influential and respected. "I'm proud of you," Richard told her one evening. They were at a gala for the foundation, surrounded by donors and supporters, wearing expensive gowns and tuxedos. Maria felt out of place in her borrowed dress, but she held her head high. "Not because of what you do, but because of who you are. You took something terrible and turned it into something beautiful." "I'm proud of us," Maria responded, squeezing his hand. "We could have let the lost years make us bitter. We could have spent all our time mourning what we couldn't have back. Instead, we turned it into something meaningful. We're helping people. We're making a difference." But healing wasn't linear. There were hard days. Days when Maria resented the childhood she had lost, when she thought about birthday parties she never had, school plays her father never saw, moments that could never be recovered. Days when Richard was consumed by guilt for not finding her sooner, for not somehow knowing where she was. Days when the gap of 23 years felt insurmountable, like a chasm they would never fully cross. "I missed your first day of school," Richard said one night during one of their weekly dinners, his voice breaking. They were at his apartment, and he had had too much wine. "I missed watching you learn to read. I missed your first dance. I missed your graduation. I missed your first heartbreak. I missed everything. Every single milestone. Every important moment. I missed all of it." "I know," Maria said quietly, reaching across the table to take his hand. "And I missed having a father. I missed feeling safe. I missed having someone who loved me unconditionally. I missed belonging. I missed being wanted." They sat in silence, the weight of loss heavy between them, tangible as stone. "But we have now," Maria finally said. "We can't change the past. We can't get back those years. But we have now, and we have the future. And we can choose what to do with it." Richard squeezed her hand. "When did you get so wise?" "Suffering teaches you things," Maria said with a sad smile. "It strips away everything that doesn't matter. It shows you what's real. And what's real is this. You and me, here together, that's real. The rest is just shadows." 5 years after their reunion, Maria stood at a podium in front of thousands of people. The Emma Rose Foundation was hosting its annual benefit concert in Central Park. Celebrities performed on stage. Politicians gave speeches. Families who had been reunited through the foundation's work shared their stories. Their voices amplified across the massive lawn. When it was Maria's turn to speak, she looked out at the crowd and saw her father standing in the front row, tears already streaming down his weathered face. Beside him stood Michael and his family, and they were all watching her with pride. 28 years ago," Maria began, her voice steady despite her nerves, "I was taken from my father. For 23 years we lived separate lives. He searched for me constantly. He never gave up hope. And I didn't even know I was lost. I didn't know there was someone out there who loved me, who wanted me, who was desperately trying to find me." The crowd was silent, listening intently. When we found each other, it wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy and complicated and painful, because you can't get back what you lost. You can't recover those years. You can only build something new with what remains. With the pieces that are left, she looked directly at Richard, her voice growing stronger. "My father and I will never get back those 23 years. We will never recover the childhood we should have shared. But we have the rest of our lives. And we're choosing to use that time to help others find their way home. Because everyone deserves to be found. Everyone deserves to belong. Everyone deserves to know they matter to someone." The crowd erupted in applause that seemed to shake the ground. Richard was openly weeping. Maria stepped off the stage and walked to him through the crowd, people parting to let her through. And they embraced as cameras flashed around them, capturing the moment. "Thank you," Richard whispered into her hair. "Thank you for coming back to me. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for being my daughter." "Thank you for never stopping looking," Maria whispered back. "Thank you for loving me even when you didn't know where I was. Thank you for being my father." That night, after the concert ended and the crowds dispersed and the workers began cleaning up the massive lawn, Maria and Richard sat on a bench in Central Park. The city hummed around them, alive and indifferent to their story, continuing its endless rhythm. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't taken that job cleaning my office?" Richard asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Every single day," Maria admitted, leaning into him. "We could have passed each other on the street 1,000 times and never known. We could have lived in the same city for decades and never found each other. But we did find each other," Richard said. "Somehow, against all odds, against all logic, we found each other. Do you think it was fate? Destiny? God? I think it was luck," Maria said. "Blind, random, impossible luck. But I'll take it. I'll take it, and be grateful for it every day for the rest of my life." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Two people who had been lost, now found. Two people who had been separated by tragedy, now together. Not perfectly, not without scars, but together nonetheless. "I love you, Emma," Richard said softly. Maria felt tears spring to her eyes. It was the first time he had said it directly, simply, without qualification or context. "I love you too, Dad," she replied. And saying that word, Dad, felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. "I love you too." And in that moment, surrounded by the city that had witnessed both their separation and their reunion, they understood that love doesn't expire. It doesn't fade with time or distance. It waits, sometimes for years, sometimes for decades, but it waits patiently in the darkness, ready to ignite the moment connection is made. And when you finally find your way home, it's there to welcome you exactly as you are, with all your scars and all your imperfections. They had lost 23 years. They would never get them back. But they had something more valuable. They had now. They had each other. They had chosen to transform their pain into purpose, their loss into meaning, their separation into something that could help others find healing. And that, in the end, was enough. She was a cleaner. He was a billionaire. They had no idea they were father and daughter until the universe brought them together. This is not a coincidence. This is a reminder. Follow. For stories that restore your faith in humanity, like, if you believe love never expires. Comment. Share your story. Share with your family. Challenge for you. This week, reach out to someone you've lost, someone you've been separated from, someone you've been missing. Not just because of Maria and Richard's story, but because life is short and connection is everything. Then come back and tell us what happened in the comments, because we believe that stories like Maria's aren't about luck. They're about never giving up. They're about always hoping. They're about the power of human connection. Are you with us?